Well, I guess we might as well go ahead and start. Okay, so once again, folks, I'm sorry about the background sound. We have another meeting going on at this time. It's just a scheduling issue, and so neither of us can really change the schedule of our meetings. So I will mute as much as I can. So um, Matt, I guess we'll go through the initial part.
Sure, this is not going to be 100% accurate, as I have given you folks the ability to unmute yourselves, so we can actually skip a fair amount of this. But if you are having any technical difficulties, please reach out to me either via the chat box. You can email me at marcher@ctps.org or by calling 857-702-3708. And with that, Len, I will turn it back to you.
Okay, so this the intention of this one. I mean, normally we don't have meetings in August, and sometimes we'll do field trips. And in lieu of our inability to do a field trip, and decided to just have a meet and greet where people get to talk more about themselves and their organizations and why it is that they are interested in being a part of RTAC. And even though I didn't specify this at the last meeting, I also like to get input from people as to what they would like for us to explore, discuss in the next year, because regardless of what happens with respect to the election in October, whoever is chair and co-chair can use that information to help build the agenda for the following months. Because it used to be the case that, I guess, CTBS, the staff would determine the agenda, but we're doing it now. New chairs may decide to do things differently, in which case then the staff will help develop the agenda more. But for the time being, we'll have more autonomy rather than less. So it's up to us to decide what we want to cover. So with that, I guess I could start with MBTA Rider Oversight Committee. But you know what? I'm going to do the chair's prerogative and come in last on this. So I'm going to hand it over to my wonderful co-chair who has shown up. Scott, want to tell us about you and your organization and maybe some things that you want to cover. And since that is maybe something people didn't prepare for, we can circle back on that. So you can talk about your organization, and then maybe based on what you hear from people, we'll circle back around and discuss what we maybe want to cover in the next year or so. All right. So, Scott.
Sure. So I represent Crosstown Connect, which is a transportation management association. We're located northwest of Boston. The effort was started by the town of Acton, but we quickly gained partners in the surrounding towns, including Littleton, Westford, Maynard, Concord, Sudbury, Boxborough, and we're basically working. The towns are working together to address public transportation, options, connections in the area. Before the TMA existed, each town kind of did their own thing, and it was kind of very compartmentalized. And once we got the towns together and started talking a little more, we realized that there were a lot of common destinations that people were going to, from towns that were neighboring each other. So maybe it would be more efficient to work together to provide transportation. So that's kind of like the town side of things that we do. And then as a TMA, we also offer more traditional TMA services, which TMAs are typically focused more towards the business community. So we have a number of programs that we work on with businesses, including some commuter shuttles that connect to the commuter rail. Those have been largely suspended for now while people are kind of staying away from the commuter rail. But as soon as that is more, I guess, more of a viable option again, we will get those back up and running. And then we also offer an emergency ride home program for people that bike or carpool to work, and then which basically gives people like an option to get home in case they're stranded at work without their car, you know, if their kid gets sick or something like that. So yeah, we basically work like it's almost like two separate things, but they work together. And in a lot of cases, we'll actually use the same vehicle for both types of purposes. So like maybe during the day, we'll run, you know, shopping trips or trips to the doctor's office. And then during the morning and evening commute times, we'll you know, do, you know, more corporate office parks and things like that. So it's basically just trying to use the limited resources that are available in, you know, suburban, smaller towns the most efficiently we can to move the most people we can. So that's kind of a quick overview of what Crosstown Connect does. You know, I'm interested and have been involved for a number of years in the Transportation Advisory Council because a lot of, you know, the decisions on funding that come, you know, federal funding affect the communities that I work in, but I also want to have a positive influence on just the region as a whole. And I think, you know, it's all interconnected. So the better the public transportation is in the region, the better that I can connect to it with my services. So that's kind of why I've been an enthusiastic member of RTAC for a while now.
So how did you find out about RTAC?
I think it was through some of the my members actually, because since our TMA is a little different, our board membership is made up of a lot of town members as well. So I think that a couple of them were queued in, and I think probably it might have been either Mike Gowing or Franny Osman, who have both been involved in RTAC longer than I have.
All right, you know, well, we'll come back if to talk about things that you might want to explore or have on the future agendas. And with that mentioned, Franny, I think that's a good segue over to Franny Osman.
Hi.
Hi,
I was
Franny.
making too much noise. Am I representing Acton, I guess? But Scott, you don't represent Acton. Am I representing Acton? Okay. Oh, you represent Crosstown Connect. See, around here, it's hard sometimes to tell the difference. Like we had a regional coordinating committee council, and it was sometimes hard to tell the difference between that and Crosstown Connect and Magic. And because we are always communities of towns or organizations working together to improve transportation. So that's what I've been doing for about 15 years. I used to work in pharmaceutical biostatistics, but then I started staying home when my third child was born, and I wanted to get a shuttle going. And specifically, I was interested in thinking about ecologically. You know, I was watching other parents take their kids places and thinking this doesn't make sense ecologically. But then as soon as I got involved, I realized for other reasons, specifically disability and age, there were a lot of other people that needed improved transportation. And we had a parking lot crunch at our train station. So I started working with a committee of people that included a selectman and somebody from the disability community and the towns of Boxborough and the United Way. And we started looking into creating a new shuttle, you know, more transportation than the two vans. Everything was so disparate. Like Scott said, we had different towns having different services, and even that within our town we had the road runner, which was dispatched by Lowell Regional Transit Authority, and we had our Council on Aging van dispatched by the Council on Aging person, and at different times there were different eligibility requirements for the different vans, and everybody had their favorite driver, so they would just say they wanted that van. So it didn't really make sense, and we started meeting multiple towns and trying to make some changes. And then there was this great funding opportunity through Governor Patrick's administration called the Community Innovation Challenge Grants, and that helped us form Crosstown Connect. So I've been sort of working on that and on various boards for years. Magic and RTAC has given me a lot of my education because I'm not trained as a transportation planner, but I talk transportation a lot. And I've been going to Magic meetings for about 15 years. And in addition, wait, I'm losing my train of thought. Well, we formed Crosstown Connect, and the idea was to connect two different, or more than two now, different regional transit authorities, because we are at a nexus around here. And our needs being at a nexus are similar to other places in the state. What I've noticed is the hubs get the attention. You know, in the MBTA, the main center of it gets attention because that's where the population is. At the regional transit authorities, they also, you know, Metro West focuses on the Birmingham area, and then it's a sort of second thought what happens in the suburbs around it. And it takes champions and organizations in those areas to bring attention to it. So in Lowell and in the Montechusett region, it's the same thing. They focus a lot on their centers. Acton, Boxborough, Maynard, we're all on the outskirts of all of those areas. So Crosstown Connect has really helped, but in a way it sort of created our own little hub, and it doesn't make sense to me statewide that transportation management associations should have to fill in what regional transit authorities should be doing for all the other communities. But that's just sort of a thought of mine. I see a lot of inequity in attention to different areas because the needs are so different. The low density areas needs are so different from downtowns. And when people are going crisscrossing for their needs and their jobs within a community, it's so different from commuting into a hub. And so that's always sort of fascinated and frustrated me, the difference in different areas of our state. But so I'm involved in the Lowell Transit Board. I'm involved with Magic, and I'm the chair of our local town's Transportation Advisory Committee. And we do in Acton now pedestrian issues, bikes, and shuttles. So I've always found, as I said, ever since I discovered RTAC, somewhere along the line, maybe it was when I became a selectman. I became a selectman in 2014, and it was probably before that one of my colleagues who was a selectman at the time said, oh, maybe you want to start going to the RTAC meetings. And I was, what? You know, what's RTAC? I keep discovering over the years new transportation organizations that that were out there. It's just, there's so much parallel play going on in our state. It's ridiculous. One day I met with a group from Worcester that had people from various unions, including the bus driver union and all this. And they were working really hard to improve transportation around there. And I'd been working so long and I still had never met that particular group. You know, they weren't a part of the RTA. They weren't a part of their planning region. Anyway, that's aside. With RTAC, when someone told me about it, my fellow selectman, and I started coming, I was, as I said, it became like my adult ed. I mean, it's sort of, you know, all the lectures and all the support and education we've gotten from the staff of CTPS and MassDOT has been very, very valuable. Sometimes it seems very random, again, who belongs, which type of organization, who sends people, who gets involved is all very undefined. But I think as long as we keep providing valuable education for all the people, not only in what's going on and they're doing, but just who is out there, I think it is useful. So I thank you, Leonard. I think you've been doing a great job. I really thank you for keeping us in the loop as things happen between meetings and what's happening on the MPO. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thanks for that introduction. I learned a lot myself. And so you gave us some hints as to what you might want to explore later on. But I think we're gonna have plenty of time to talk about that after we all introduce ourselves. And so next, I'm gonna go to Dan Martin.
Hi, I'm Dan Martin. I work for the Brookline Transportation Department. We're a small division in the engineering department, which has 10 engineers. And then in my division, I work with Todd Crane. And he's the one that's invited me to come to these meetings and when he can't make it. And in our division, Brookline, it's a town right next to Boston. And a lot of the issues we discussed at RTAC impact us. The TIP funding, the I-90 Alston project is a big one coming up. It's been a great experience coming to the meetings, and I appreciate your work you guys all do.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. And next we'll go to Andy.
Dan made up for my long introduction. So just average us out.
Oh, well, we have plenty of time, and so like I said, we'll come back around to talk about what folks want to discuss later on, and we're not going to make this last any longer than necessary. So if we go around again and we exhaust our thoughts about what we want to have in a short amount of time, I'll do a quick summary of the meeting. We'll do new business to old business, and maybe you'll get some time back. So.
I just apologize for being so long.
Oh, nothing to apologize, but that's fine, And if we're running out of time or something, I would have let you know. So thank you. No, I liked your introduction, Fran. So thank you. Andy.
So my name is Andy Reeker. I work for the City of Cambridge. I'm in the Community Development Department. So I think I'm interested in RTAC. I think for a lot of the same reasons that have already been elucidated. I think I learned quite a bit of what goes on at the state level and the regional level by participating in RTAC meetings, and I think it's been really great. I actually used to work at CTPS in the transit planning group, and so there I was able to really get an understanding of what is going on with the MBTA and MassDOT and the projects they're working on. Now that I work for a municipality, it's definitely very different. And I think Cambridge, probably kind of like Brookline, is constantly trying to navigate this relationship with Boston as like an employment center, activity center, and also trying to be able to manage our own kind of transportation needs. We're, with Kendall Square also becoming like a pretty important employment center in the region. And so also trying to work through how, this still relatively not super populated city of 100-something thousand is able to manage the issues of being essentially part of a really big, broad, very economically active region. And I think for us to be able to know what's going on in the other parts of the broader greater Boston region, but also just within the inner core is actually one of the biggest challenges we have. And so RTAC is just one of the many windows that we have into what's going on kind of in the inner core. And so it's really good to come to these meetings on a regular basis. So, we're kind of aware of what's advancing, how things are advancing, and things like that. A little bit more just about the City of Cambridge, because I think a lot of folks don't know this, and since we have a little bit of time, I can go a little bit off on a tangent. But the City of Cambridge doesn't have a transportation department. So all of the transportation planning happens between 3 departments. And for folks who maybe have a more cynical view of it, it's like the 3-headed beast. You have to go with community development, or you have to go with traffic and parking, or you have to go with the Department of Public Works. But we coordinate really quite a bit between the 3 departments. But I just work primarily on the more long-term planning stuff, which tends to be what the MPO is talking about, is how to fund these more long-term plans. And so I really feel like it's a good fit in that respect as well. But that's a little bit more about me and the role that I'm playing in the city.
All right, Andy, thank you very much. And we have Mr. Stewart, John Stewart, joining us. So John, you want to tell us more about yourself and your organization, and how you came to be a part of RTAC and what you get out of it?
John might still be connecting, but just in case, now I'm going to try to unmute him. And nope. Well, we could try circling back.
Okay, fine. All right, cool. Okay, well, so I am from the MBTA Rider Oversight Committee, and I could probably go on twice as long as Franny. I'll give you the history of the Rock. But I'll give you a little bit of it. And we were created in 2004 as a result of the 2003 fare increase, and we were called. The entity was called the MBTA Rider Oversight Committee, and when I saw that advertised, it was oversight part of it that appealed to me. What became clear once I got to be a part of the committee was that the advocacy groups that were a part of it had really meant for it to be the advocacy committee. But I, along with the other 11 public members, because at that time there were 8 members, and then 4 alternates. We all came on with the notion of us being more oversight as opposed to advocacy. So the initial group was 8 public members, 8 advocacy groups, and 8 members from the MBTA, so we formed several subcommittees, and over time those subcommittees merged. The first thing that we did as an organization was under the leadership of Liz Moore, who I think at the time was part of CTPS and not service planning, because at that point in time, I hadn't really teased out CTPS versus service planning, but she led the initiative to create the fare structure. So we were meeting, I would say, anywhere from 6 to 8 times a month, working on the fare structure for the automated fare collection. And after that, that structure was created and AFC was pretty much implemented, was about the time the Patriot administration had created or developed a new ethics policy, which then required that members of the Rider Oversight Committee become quasi-state employees. And so a lot of the advocacy groups saw a conflict of interest with that, and so they withdrew from the committee. And so it really became at that point mostly public members. Now, other than working on the fare policy, there was no real official mandate for the group, and so we don't really have oversight in the way that FMCB has oversight. We can recommend things for the T to do, but we can't make them do things like the FMCB can. And so what having little power has done, and I think is a good thing, is that it has made it necessary for us to create good relationships with people that are based on respect and trust. And so I feel that we get really good information from folks because they respect us and they trust us, as opposed to telling us what we want to hear because of our authority or their fear and of the power that we may have. But along with that comes the lack of ability to really make something happen with the snap of a finger. So we essentially have to make the case for something. And at this point, though, we really know the people to whom we need to make those cases. And sometimes people will do what you recommend. A lot of times they won't, but they often have good reasons for not doing so. The main one being just a lack of resources. So I had seen evidence of our attack at meetings when we would come in the room after our attack had met. And I kind of wondered about the organization, but I wasn't paying much attention to it. And I once I became the chair of one of our subcommittees, this Capital Investment Finance Subcommittee, which was a merger of the Finance Committee and the Capital Investment Committee, because I'd been the chair of the Finance Committee for a while. I hadn't been involved with capital investment. It was just this beast me that I did not feel like dealing with me because I knew that there was a lot to learn in it. But once we merged the two and I was chair of both of them, then I had to learn about it. And I'm happy for it normally because generally I like learning things, but I knew it's going to be a heavy lift because it's so complex, and indeed it is. And that's what really got me more involved with learning what's going on with the MPO and the long range transportation plan and the transportation improvement plan, and more importantly, most excitingly for me, the UPWP. So the more I understood those processes, policies, the more interested I got in NPO, and I was having to talk with Liz Moore about one of those plans. I can't remember. This was not long before she retired, and she said, "You know what? You all should be a part of RTAC." And she took me over to David Farjan. Is that his name? What's his name? Matt?
Yep.
Yeah. And so then I started sitting in on the committees and quickly realized I really liked what was going on in the committees, became a member, and here I am as co-chair or chair, and we have co-chairs on ROC. So, and I actually consider Scott more of a co-chair than a vice chair. It's just the bylaws of the committee that make Scott the vice chair, and so that's my introduction, how I got to be here, and we'll talk more about things. Yeah, sure.
What was your when you talk about the finance committee and the investment committee of what?
Oh, I'm sorry, the MBT Rider Oversight Committee.
Oh, okay. So they have all those committees within them.
Yeah. Well, we initially had 4 committees. So we had a marketing committee, and then we had operations committee, and we had a finance committee, and we had a capital investment committee. And over time, they have consolidated into 2. So now we have the marketing and operations committee, and now we have the capital and capital investment finance committee. So yeah. With that, if John Stewart can talk, we'll see if he has anything he wants to tell us.
Maybe if he could put in the chat if he's there and is having trouble.
I am sending him a message as we speak.
Okay. I'd love to hear as we talk also from the MAPC. The CTPS staff. It's always interesting to hear your background and interests.
Well, I guess that would be an invitation to Kate while Scott's working on seeing if we can get John unmuted. Kate, you want to tell us anything?
Sure. So I think I might have shared before, but my name's Kate White. I'm the public outreach coordinator at CTPS. I've been in the role for about 1 year and 4 months, I think. And previously that I worked in community engagement at an agency that provided affordable housing to older adults. Their name's Two Life Communities, formerly Jewish Community Housing for the Elderly. And then prior to that, I was working in volunteer recruitment and management at an organization called Community Servings, which provides free meals to people experiencing different illnesses that are tailored to their dietary needs. So just kind of worked in various forms of community engagement. And my background is in a master's in urban planning, but really went to school to pursue the intersections of transportation, public health, sustainability, and housing, but really with the public outreach focus. So it's kind of, my favorite work is working with people on how do you kind of better connect people to like policy development input, and then as well, like it's always a feedback loop, right? Like it's never a done process. And so like having that presence and connections and relationships are really important to any public process. That's just a little background about me.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah.
So any luck with John, Matt?
Not getting any messages back from him.
All right. Well, we tried. You know,
Yeah.
well, Franny's interested in you, Matt. Who knows why, but let's tell her something.
I'm confused myself.
Yeah.
So I am Matt Archer. I am MPO staff, and I work with Kate in the certification activities group. I started at CTPS actually as a data collector. My formal background is in video production, and the previous data collection supervisor was a friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, do you want part-time work for a month?" And then at the end of the month, he said, "You want to do some data entry?" And while I was in the office, the then manager of certification activities, Pam Wolf, she needed some data entry done, and I basically never left. I've been interested in transportation for a very long time, though. I grew up in the Boston region, in or around Boston. I've basically lived here my whole life, and been taking transit since I was very young. So it was really exciting to join this team, and I'm really lucky because I have such great colleagues like Kate. The certification activities group is just fantastic, and as is everybody at CTPS, but I'm really happy where I am. I've done other stints in other parts of the office. I was the data collection supervisor for a little while, no longer, now full-time certification activities again. And yeah, when the previous coordinator for the advisory council, Jen Rowe, left, the coordinator position was offered to me, and here I am. And I really love working with you folks, and frankly, I like this intimate setting that we have right now. I think this is a really cool format. So anyway, that's me rambling about myself. I'm not really good at talking about myself, so I apologize.
We'll get you more practice on that.
All right.
So that at some point you can run for an office somewhere or something.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Cool. So now let's talk about maybe ideas or things that people would like to have us cover in upcoming meetings over whatever time frame. So I'll just at this point just leave it up to you all to unmute your mics and talk. I can't really see you at this point. Let me see. I can maybe bring up a grid beam, but unless it gets a little raucous, then we'll just kind of let people talk at will.
I have something that I'm always fascinated with, and I would love to learn or hear more about. Well, actually, I'm fascinated, alternatively, with board, and that is how the MPO makes its decisions. Because several times I've been attending MPO meetings, and things have been like, "Whoa, wait, what just happened?" Like I remember a few years ago, we were about to budget a certain amount of money to go here or there, and suddenly someone from the floor said, "Wait, the MBTA needs some new engines," and suddenly it just sort of trumped everything else, and we suddenly changed course. And I said, "How did that happen?" And they said, well, you can do it from the floor, or because it's the MBTA or something. Little things like that, or when somebody's in the room or not in the room, or I've just gotten the feeling sometimes that I have a lot to learn about how the MPO makes its decisions. And so I would love to hear the impressions that you who attend the MPO and participate in it see as how it goes on, what are the pros and cons of various things, and also how our tax roll on it functions.
Okay. All right. So I'll take that one. I mean, I'm not going to answer it now.
No,
I mean,
no.
I mean, that would be either a topic for a regular RTAC meeting or a bonus meeting. And certainly, I'm willing to have that conversation with you one-to-one too.
Yeah.
So,
You might not want to describe your observations.
oh no, it's not really a fear thing, No, I mean, I'm willing to say anything that I will say to you, will be on the record in respect that you can repeat it anyone.
Yes.
I mean, it's generally my style, and I find that it comes even more handy now as a as a person
Public.
that yeah. So it's like the more you can just say on the record, the better. It's just easier,
Yeah.
And the more I can say on the record, the better, and the less I talk about what other people say to me, the better.
Mhm.
So you can say whatever you want to me, Fran, and you probably won't hear it elsewhere, but anyway, so yeah, that's a good
No,
one.
I feel that way too. So
Yeah. So open mic. Okay, so I'm going to dive in there. So Andy, you had brought up something for a bonus meeting, and I didn't write it down, but I remember that we didn't do it because we did the pedestrian report card and at this meeting. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I think it's getting a little bit a little bit deeper into maybe the process of the two. I say more significant right now, knowing that that's not exactly the words that I want to use, but the UPWP studies on the sub regional corridor, priority corridors, and then I think there's another UPWP study. I think in general, I think there's kind of a question of like regional equity that I think Franny's been speaking to a little bit of, how we kind of on a regional scale focus on the areas where maybe there's institutional gaps that have kind of been created intentionally or unintentionally. So I think that just getting a better understanding of how those studies are actually like, trying to pick out and evaluate those corridors that they end up choosing. I think there's also maybe beyond the regional equity piece, there's also just a outreach and engagement piece that is a little bit different maybe right now in kind of COVID, but I think as a transit planner, I think that we've been thinking about how to pivot to a more meet people where they are model, instead of hosting more events and doing more things to invite people to come visit us, right? And so I think getting an understanding of how those studies maybe are trying to pivot that way. I think what I found is that the numbers do go up in terms of people you engage with, like new people that you engage with, who may not have realized that the city wants to talk and have conversations about what people need in their neighborhood, right? Even beyond transportation, for example. But that, of course, is great, but also too that the depth of the input that we get about the transportation projects changes in quality, right? Like we get less advocates and people who are already connected, and in some respects, at least in the community I'm in, they're very entitled to having their opinion heard. And we end up connecting with folks who don't even realize that there's people in the city that work on the issues of, how the sidewalk gets taken care of. How the trees on that sidewalk are taken care of, beyond just the kind of simple considerations of parking permits and curb uses and stuff like that. So, I'd really love to see the MPO also be able to pivot and do those kind of things in these more technical sounding and technical activities, to be able to also do that, for those more technical studies, I think does the region well. Does good by the region. So, I'd love to understand, kind of on those two tracks, what's going on at the MPO with the technical staff there.
Okay, so the technical staff, I got that, and then the corridor studies, I mean, for UPW. Was there another set of studies or type of study in the UPWP that you were interested in? Did I hear that or not?
I have to maybe look to Kate or Matt. I forgot. There's two, I think, main studies in the UPWP that are like, you know,
Okay, I know what you're talking.
largest amount. I just don't remember that.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think they're in category O. I mean, and so I know what you're talking about. So I can go back to UPWP and find those. So, okay, fine, I got you. You know, so okay, all right. Okay,
Can I just piggyback on something Andy said?
sure.
I mean, something about what you were talking about reminded me of an observation that I've often had. The people who use public transit, and it's transit. I know we're interested in all types of transportation, but I don't know much about bridges and freight. But when I'm thinking about transit, it's the people of color in communities of color that seem to depend on it more. And there are so many incredibly long trips. I'm talking about non-COVID times and probably COVID also. People spend so much time getting to work and so much overhead. It's amazing how much stress that adds to people's lives. And I feel like the more we focus on those communities and where they're going, and also get the sort of representation. You probably deal with this on the oversight committee all the time, Len, is making sure that you're representing the population that's using the transit. Anyway, that always bothers me, and I'm not sure with all of our studies and our improvements, we're really solving the problem of people taking 2 hours to get to their job in Newton Corner, you know, when they live in Mattapan or something like that. Anyway.
Right. Well, I mean, of course, yeah, but transit can't solve where the jobs are.
No. I'm talking about better transit or better solutions than getting on a trolley to a trolley to a bus.
Right.
You know, something
bridge-like,
you know, BRIDG, like.
Yeah, I hear you, you know, and all right, you know, so I guess what I'm trying to take out of that as something for us to look into. I mean, do you want to encapsulate that as to something that we should investigate?
Yeah, or sort of maybe bring to light the transportation challenges that low income, in particular communities of color, have with long commutes, and see if we can pay attention to that and solve that more, because it seems so frustrating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I'm sorry for the delay there. I mean, I was taking notes in another desktop. I mean, that's several desktops over, and I mute my microphone so that you don't hear the background, so it can take a little while for me to get back to you. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, well, thanks for the easy one there, Fran. Right now, so we'll just we'll dive into that one and solve it in one short meeting. Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to put Dan on the spot. So Dan, if you want to say anything, I mean, you can unmute yourself, but if you don't, that's fine too.
Sure. One thing I'm wondering if it's coming up on our radar is that I-90 project I mentioned earlier. I know that they just released their scoping report that's going to lead to the environmental impact that they're writing. I wonder if we want to provide comment for that.
So my understanding, Matt Archer, is that we are limited in the comments that we can make as an advisory council. I mean, certainly there isn't a limit that members can make. I mean, so it's fine. I think I have certainly no problem with us diving into a topic in order to educate our members, so that they can, as individuals or as part of their groups, go off and make comments. But my understanding is that RTAC, we can only really comment on the UPWP and the TIP and the LRTP.
What I will say is that, you know, traditionally the advisory council, yes, that's what it provides comments on. But maybe I'll need to double check the bylaws, but there's nothing that would, prevent us from providing a comment on a work scope. Granted, by the time it's made public, it's generally about a week before it's going to be getting voted on by the MPO. So that's a pretty narrow window. I will say that at a previous advisory council meeting, Sandy Johnston, the UPWP manager, floated the idea, and this is by no means definite, of getting the advisory council involved during the creation of work scopes to provide comment during that time. And if you'd like, that's something that I could circle back to him about.
Okay. Does that meet what you were wanting us to do, Dan?
Possibly. I mean, I'm not sure what our group would want to do, but I know it has a lot of regional impacts, and they're discussing how many train lines to build during the reconstruction, which could impact future capacity.
Right.
So it definitely has a regional effect on all of us.
Right. And certainly one way that we can, give feedback on that, is through the MPO meetings, and that would be through me. So what I try to do is let people know what's coming up on the agendas before the meetings. I'm kind of spotty about that, but certainly you can always go to the calendar and see when there's a meeting, what's on the agenda, and I will happily convey whatever you want as an individual to the MPO on behalf of RTAC, and to the extent that we know something's coming up on the MPO's agenda far in advance, and we can discuss that at a meeting before that meeting, then I can bring the thoughts of the group to the board when we meet. So that's always our prerogative. So to that extent, we can always make comments. Yeah. So
Great.
so I'll try and keep an eye out for comment periods for the Austin project. Or are you saying that's already ready for us to make comments?
I think it's in a 30-day comment period right now.
Okay. All right.
But it would be up to you whether you want to have us write it as a group a comment or not. But that's just something I've been looking at. And
yeah. Well. Let's say I think it's probably going to be we'd have to make a decision about that now. And let's just, for the sake of, let's take the worst case scenario, which is that we won't. If there's something that you want to comment on it, then by all means give me those comments. And I can make them at the meeting on the 20th. I don't know if that project's going to be on the MPO's agenda, but I can always make it as a comment from the public, or if it's relevant to new business, do it there. So I'm a little, I'm just a little unclear on what to do. But what I want to do is get to a yes in getting you some way to make comments to the powers that be through RTAC. So we'll get you there somehow, and I may need to follow up with you by email. So thank you. Anything else, Dan?
no, that's it.
All right. And if for some reason that was unsatisfactory, once again, feel free to follow up with me on email, and then we'll tease this out. So I see joining us now is David Montgomery.
Hi there.
Hi, David.
Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. You're on the election committee. We said the last person to join me on the election committee, but we'll talk about that later. You want to tell us about your organization, why you're part of RTAC?
Me? You asking me?
I'm asking you.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Please.
Sure.
Thank you.
So it's funny. In some ways I don't feel at all qualified to tell you much about my organization, because I represent the town of Needham. I am a volunteer in that capacity. I was a town meeting member, I still am, some years back. Realized, and at the time I was working in Boston, actually in Cambridge, commuting from Needham, and looking for a way to play a little more active role in civic affairs. And one of the challenges is that a lot of meetings in town tend to meet at hours that just don't sort of correlate well with raising young kids and working in Boston or in the city. So there was this listing for an open position with the Regional Transportation Advisory Council that Needham was looking to fill. And I said, what's that? And so that I ended up getting involved. It just sort of fit my schedule well because I could go over for lunch for the afternoon and I started to learn about transportation development and policy from participating in it and observing. And there were a few people, unfortunately, many of the people I learned from who were active members of the advisory council are no longer with us. Frank DeMacy was a name that some may remember. I'm not sure if John probably remembers him. And he kind of took me under his wing soon after I arrived. And Frank had once been the vice chair and for many years, one of the people who served with Steve Olenoff. And so I learned a lot from them and then found myself in the chair position much sooner than I should have been. And learned a lot from doing that too. Learned from sitting at the big kids table at the MPO. And but getting back to sort of our organization, quote, our town. So Needham sends a representative to the advisory council, and we also have a person who sits on the MBTA advisory board, being a town located on the commuter rail. And I think to a large extent, historically, the reason for participating in these organizations was to kind of just make sure we're getting what we can out of the system in terms of the T is delivering on its past promises and the commuter rail service continues. What I got exposed to fairly quickly and still sort of dealing with is that the transportation planning and infrastructure planning is a lot more than just sort of staying on good terms with the powers that be at the T, but it's an element of understanding a much bigger puzzle and seeing the other people in that universe as not just political allies, although there's some of that, but also real treasure troves of knowledge of how you work in this system to pursue long-term goals. And so for the last several years, I've been sort of focused on it from that perspective of trying to get various players within Needham to not just talk among themselves, which they do a good job of doing, frankly, but also to be aware of this universe we're all a part of, and trying to increase the transparency of how we communicate with that network. Overall, during all of this, there's a project that is they're sort of on the verge of breaking ground on, or to some extent they've broken ground, but it's a very big one for Needham, which is the Highland Avenue, Needham Street corridor, running from Needham into Newton. And what was quickly evident in when I started working on this, I was this was just still a dream. It had not been programmed. It was on the LRTP list of universe for a long time. There were people in town who had been around when it first got on that list, who were the guy who spearheaded that for Needham shared with me that it had been his dream for decades that he would live to the day to see it built. And he gave up hoping for that probably about 10 years ago. And he unfortunately did pass away about 2 years ago. and the project is finally going to happen starting this year. But what I've noticed in this is that working with Newton toward this shared goal, as much as a challenge as that can be, has been crucial to advancing the project. So bureaucracies can be slow and cumbersome, but it's better to plunge in and try to understand them and work within them. And eventually some progress gets made. That's sort of my perspective on Needham as a transportation entity. I do serve I'm the chair of Needham's Transportation Committee. And we're trying to sort of revamp that a little bit and think about how it can do more than it's done historically. That's what I got, Len. I'll share, I guess one other thing is Franny, who I see is on the call, has been a source of some knowledge, helpful knowledge. She worked with others, including Mike McGowan, to develop the MTA that Scott now runs, and that is something that excites me and a few others here in Needham, that we could either try to do something similar or at least learn some lessons from their experience, because we have I think we have a lot of little mini shuttle services around the area with no particularly good coordination.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of room for synergy and efficiencies if we just get the right, people buying into this idea that you contribute your pot, your piece, and you contribute your piece, and it's the old stone soup story. We can make something better.
That's great. We're happy to talk from our area
Not significant.
to help you.
Yeah. So, well,
Len,
yeah, sure. Go
I
ahead.
have one more thing that I don't know if this is appropriate to say it now, but when you say, you were asking like what kind of things you'd like to see us looking at on RTAC. And I'm on the working group for the North-South Rail Link, which would connect North and South stations and connect our two systems, North and South, both interstate and within the state. I just think it's so important, and I've sort of been disappointed that we haven't, well, most people I speak to just don't publicly talk about it. It's been this weird frustration. I talk to people at all levels of all different organizations around here that say, yeah, it makes total sense to me and I'm totally for it, but I really can't push it from where I am or something. It's a little strange that, so that, you know, Stephanie Pollock and the governor just stay quiet on it. And I do think COVID behind us, it's so important to become one system, one smooth system. So yeah, I just do. So I just have to say, I would love if we as on RTAC would have that in our vocabulary,
the access,
and
so like
and sort of keep bringing it up so we get a feel amongst us of an opinion, rather than like, well, no, I'm not going to share my opinion. If we sort of had a consensus going, even if it changes in time, I'd love to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, that's an easy one. I mean, it's an easy ask, and so either we can just have a discussion amongst ourselves, or we can have a presentation, and then have discussion after the presentation. And yeah, all right. So we can, yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, and so what I was hearing from David too is that he wanted to work with you to help develop something like a crosstown connect, for Needham. But that seems like it was something that he was going to do with you and not necessarily something that we need to explore as part of RTAC. Or is that something you would like us to explore as part of something that RTAC pursues, David?
No, I was just sort of mentioning is that the participating in advisory council has allowed me to meet people who have, I didn't know going in there that I would meet somebody like Franny or Mike, who would then have these relevant experiences. And I don't know what's the next challenge we're going to be thinking about it 2 years from now. But I do now know, having done this long enough, that somebody in this room will have some relevant experience. And if it's not within advisory council,
Well, we should.
it gives us nonetheless access to the MPO staff and a huge knowledge base. So it's a worthwhile. I mean, it pays off to have that knowledge base, access to that knowledge base, even when you're not sure what the issues will be. Just want to say one quick correction. I said Mike McGowan. I meant Mike Gowing, former chair of the advisory council.
Yep, gotcha. Yeah, well, and look, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think the MPO at RTAC is a really good way to gain basic knowledge about transportation and the transportation system here, which I have a transit background, but I quickly realized that the transit sits within the transportation network, and you really need to understand how those all come together in order to advocate intelligently, because everyone, public officials and staff are very good at listening to people and making you feel like you are listened to, regardless of what you say. But it certainly helps everyone if you know what you're talking about. And the more you learn, I mean, then the more intelligently you can advocate for what you want and learn who to talk with, who to work with in order to amplify your voice or amplify theirs. It's even better a lot of times when you amplify theirs. So is there something that you want, or some things that you want us to pursue or investigate, David, regardless of who is chair over the next few months, year or so?
Something is not different. If you don't have a significant p-value for something.
I guess no, I don't have a list of things to hand over. I guess I would encourage us to consider exploring speakers who aren't just within the building. There is kind of a natural tendency to look toward the MPO staff themselves, which is great because we learn a lot from them. And there are other people, of course, in MassDOT. But what can happen too is that we end up being kind of an insular little group that's hearing the same stuff that's getting told to us, and then it's getting told to the MPO, and then we comment on it to the MPO, and we don't always exercise the freedom that we have to invite people who aren't part of that world, but who nonetheless have useful things to say. I mean, we did a few months ago have somebody from, I forgot what the name of the association was, but he was very
Josh Ostroff from Transportation for Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I thought that was great to have a sort of a new voice to in our meeting, and also sometimes people like that are not necessarily. I mean, I don't know specifically about Jack, but it's possible there could be a voice out there that is, for whatever odd reason, maybe not likely going to get an audience at the MPO. Which doesn't mean they don't deserve a chance to share their thoughts, and we can provide sometimes a forum that the MPO can't. That doesn't have the time to do that. So I just encourage us to keep sort of plugging in and looking further abroad. I do think we are we could benefit from trying again to work on expanding our membership. I know that we've been saying that for years, but unfortunately we haven't seen the membership growing much. So I would just urge us to not forget about that task.
I hear you. Well, that's going to be a nice segue. Well, I was thinking about segue into, maybe I'll segue to Kate and then come back to Scott. And I hear you about the outside speakers. Certainly, if you have anyone in mind, let me know. I have been defaulting a lot to staff because I hear interesting things in the board meetings, and I feel that they are worth deeper exploration. And I feel like I feel like I've found a good catch at the board meetings, and I'm just so happy to bring them back to the advisory council so that you can hear what I hear and then more. But so that's been intentional on my part. But I hear what you're saying, David, and so I think we should do more of that. And certainly if you have suggestions for those folks, I'm happy to reach out to them. I'll do the legwork. But if you have the names, that will certainly help a lot. So
A few years ago, Len, we were in the fortunate position of having a regular yearly, or at least every year and a half or so, visit from a relatively obscure professor who's now the Secretary of the Transportation. So, I mean, she was our regular guest.
Well,
and it was wonderful to have her come in, and she was a bit of a firebrand, and we were privileged enough to have her input at a time where she wasn't as sort of well known and hard to get as she is now. But there may be other people out there who are starting to make waves, and the MPO is not in the business of making waves. We can maybe take a little bit of that into the system.
You could have a lot of
I
overlap between.
go ahead. No, please. I interrupted you. Go. No, please go.
I'm all done.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say, she used to talk to me too. But from what and for a little while, my ego was damaged, but then I realized she's not talking to anyone. So I don't feel so badly. So I mean, maybe some years later, she'll come back and tell us, what was going on and why she couldn't talk to us. Because, and I say this humorously, because every time I hear her in public talking, it's like, well, she's still as sharp and as ever, and as on the ball as ever, and so I'm sure she's just busier than ever. But I hear you. So, all right, well, I'll rack my brain, and you will too, I'm sure, and we'll come up with some other guests. Whether I'm pushing from this chair or pushing from a chair alongside you, or who knows, maybe you'll be in my chair, David. So David just mentioned membership. I was actually hoping that maybe some other folks might join us and hear a little bit more about us. But it's as small as someone said, pretty intimate group, and that has its pluses too. But David did talk about trying to bring in new members. And Kate, did you want to say anything about that or not?
Pretty much took up the whole meeting.
And I'm happy to comment or talk. And so one thing that I've been trying to do in all of our public outreach is to talk about the opportunity of the advisory council. And as you know, like, outreach is a little bit different right now. However, we're still talking to community organizations, trying to hop on to existing events. I know Andy brought something up too, that, sometimes it's more, and I agree, it's more important to go where people are. So we've been trying to find, not only to keep talking to those community organizations that we hear from in different activities, but also to connect with new ones. And then to have either one-on-one meetings or attend their monthly meetings, just to kind of talk about these opportunities. So we are trying to talk to organizations and talk about, like, what are the roles, responsibilities, the benefits, and then also to just pitch it in as many places as possible. And so along with working with different community organizations, we're also at the upcoming DIDB stakeholder meeting on August 25th. Scott will also talk about the opportunities to participate in the advisory council to that group who've been involved in that specific process, but this is a way to continue engagement. And then we're just going to keep looking for opportunities. One thing that I've been doing is, attending a lot of, webinars, because there's so many opportunities right now, and then following up with different speakers afterwards, talking about the MPO, the intersections of transportation and different, different social policies, and just really trying to get our name out there as an opportunity. So we're kind of working lots of different formats. I think one thing that's come up and is interesting is capacity. And so, like, I agree with what you said, David, about, like, trying to bring in more voices. So we're trying to figure out, like, what are ways to kind of create those paths, and if there's like limits to capacity, what are ways that they can engage in other work that could then further potentially like being part of our TAC later. So I know it's a lot of information, but do you have any questions on that? Just also working with Scott and Len about opportunities to engage with new stakeholders.
That's why I went through this process.
You want to say more, Dave?
And David
No,
has humored
I don't want to. I just wanted to sort of get it out in the open again as an area I think we have to think about. I mean, it's sort of self-evident. We've got eight windows on the screen, and it's a small group. Now it's not always this small, but we haven't seen a whole lot of growth in a while. We've seen some replacement people, but I don't think we've seen a net gain in a while.
I have a question, David. What do you think would be the optimal size for the group? So taking into account the length of the meeting. So right now, we're at 105 minutes for our meetings.
Yeah.
And, so I guess I'll ask you two questions. What do you think is the optimal length of time for what you think is the optimal number of members? And by that, I mean active members. And so you might want to then multiply that by a certain percentage to get the number of people who are really going to be active. But I think you understand the question, right?
Yeah, and I don't know that there is a magic number. I mean, certainly it's not. I mean, having just more. I briefly worked in the travel industry, and the term of art was bums in seats. That everything's good. The more bums in seats you have. I don't think that's necessarily true here. We don't want just more people for the sake of having more people. But what we want is people who are actually bringing some additional perspective that's not already there. And so from I'm often thinking about geographically, the number of towns that are regularly participating is very low. And I would think that we would want to spread, to be confident that we're representing the region that we claim to be representing. And so looking at the map and seeing which towns we actually do have and where there are large holes, which I think there must be several, focusing on trying to get some of those represented would be good. I think it's consistent with our holding ourselves out as being the regional advisory council. In terms of the organizations that the advocacy groups, that one's a little harder because I don't know how to quantify how well we're filling or representative of the various voices that are out there. So are there 30 other organizations out there that are doing stuff that would fit well with ours? I honestly don't know. If maybe there are only 3 others out there that we should be recruiting. I can't tell you. But I just sort of feel like my gut tells me we're less diverse in terms of just because our numbers are so small. We're not as robust as we even once were a few years ago. So optimal has never been really. I've never seen us have too many people in my time on the council.
Gotcha.
There's some institutional memory of it, perhaps, but I don't remember. I didn't experience it myself.
I got it. No, that's fine. So because I'm surprised that like the board has about 20 people around the table, and those meetings, they can run a couple hours easy, because the policy there is to really let people ask questions until they're done asking questions. So you're not really sticking to a timeline. You have a sense of how long a given presentation will last, but until the last question is answered, and they don't really move on. And I find it works surprisingly well, but then I enjoy those meetings a lot, so I don't mind spending a lot of time at them. But I was thinking also that one thing to do would be to get representatives from towns that aren't on the board, because as you know, each sub-region has a representative on the board, but then there will be other towns from those sub-regions that aren't, so we could try to reach out to them. And there are a lot of organizations out there, advocacy organizations. Kate sent me that list, and there are a lot of people out there that we could reach out to. And so, what I would suggest, because Scott is by virtue of the bylaws being the chair of the membership committee. So I'll ask you to work with him, and I don't know if I can't be a part of that committee. I know I can step in if Scott isn't available, but I'm certainly interested in pursuing that some more myself. Putting more effort into it. So with that, I'm going to bring in Scott, who can talk more about that if he wants, and then maybe things that he'd like to see on upcoming agendas.
Before,
Yeah.
can I interrupt?
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I just want to say, in response to what David said and what you're saying, is that I totally agree with you, Len, that to look at more systematically, look at who's on and who's not on that we can invite by telling them what we are, what we do, and what they would get out of it, and find out what they can contribute. It's always so random what organizations and what towns are on and are coming to the meetings. There have been times when it's been Walk Boston and a Somerville Path group and a bus company from Plymouth. And then there's other times that there's totally different population of attendees. And if we can sort of get a hold of who's here and reach out. So I agree with you about doing that. So thanks.
Yeah, sure. And I'll just say one other thing too is that for a little while, the sub-regions were doing presentations to the MPO. Soon after I got there, I haven't seen those lately. Maybe they've wrapped them up. And I had asked one of them, why is it that you aren't a part of RTAC? And I said, is it that you feel that it's redundant? And I kind of saw that was the way that they were leaning. And so I think maybe one of the issues that we might be running into with other towns from the sub-regions is that they feel that they can get their voices heard through their representatives for sub-regions that are on the board. But still, we can still reach out to them and make it clear that they are invited and welcome. And some of us may take us up on it. But what I was also thinking is asking them, so if you don't want to, are there advocacy groups or people other than you that you would recommend who don't necessarily interact with the representative town from that sub-region? So anyways, I'll stop and turn it over to Scott.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say I definitely agree with the fact that I think there should be more municipal membership. Just it does seem to be spotty, and it also tends to be like certain areas, I guess, where there's more people coming from. But I also wanted to just say that Kate did put together a really good list of other organizations that exist. It was pretty extensive. We had a call about membership, I guess probably a couple weeks ago now, to kind of go over these things and try to come up with some ideas. We're going to be working on it in the coming months, as far as getting out to, maybe we can't get to physical meetings, but we'll get out to meetings virtually, and kind of explain who we are and target some of the organizations that are either at those meetings, or we can reach out to them just outside of that stream, personally, just try to get our membership higher and more diverse in terms of the types of organizations. I do definitely see that there probably are some towns that have members on the board probably might find it either redundant or just they've got limited people or time and they don't want to have people at both. But I think most of them are just sub-regional, so there's definitely a lot more towns that could be involved, obviously based on the size of the geography we cover. So we'll do our best to reach out on that. In terms of speakers, I don't I don't have a lot. I mean, there's a few of the projects in the UPWP that look kind of interesting, and I'd like to see maybe some presentations on those as those progress. I did want to also just touch on one other thing that Franny mentioned, and that is, we've talked about this before, I think, in a limited way, but I'd really like, and I don't think this is, I don't know if this is necessarily something we could talk about at a meeting, unless we could really drill down on who we could talk to, but finding a way to, like, for instance, how Franny was talking about how Crosstown Connect is like at this intersection of a bunch of different institutional groups, you know, whether it's RTAs or RPAs or, you know, all these different planning and transportation organizations. And we've talked within Crosstown Connect about how we could try to work with either legislators or planners at a higher level on how to structure funding in a way that would kind of incentivize cooperation between these entities, particularly RTAs, because they kind of, and it's through no fault of their own really, but they kind of come up to their boundaries, and then even at the edge of those, there's some towns that don't even have an RTA at all, and you know, it's just, we need to figure out a way that it's not only just like this pie in the sky, like, oh, that would be good to do because we should, but also that it would actually benefit our RTA. We'll get more money or something if we work together with other regions to try to make the connections between regions better. Because I mean, we basically had to, I mean, in a way, Crosstown Connect is sort of like a mini RTA. We have our own transit services and things like that. And, you know, it would be better if we didn't have to create whole new organizations just to, you know, serve our little spot in the world too. Other than that, you know, I just like following along because, you know, I find that a lot of the UPWP projects are good. I like some of the interactive databases, like the TIP database and some of the other ones that just kind of keep you informed about the area. And so we've had a couple presentations on those databases, and if any more come online, I'd like to see more of those because those are always good, and they're a good tool that everyone that attends the meetings can use. I think that's about it for me.
Thank you very much, Scott. And so yeah, and I understand what you're getting at about, I mean, the gaps in the network, I mean, for transit. And I have my whole notion of the entire transportation system being used as a transit system, where people pay for access, based on the way they use it, and based on affordability, and it's along the models of people just not owning in their vehicles, but still making sure that people who need access get as much access as they want, so that they're not really missing on the vehicle. But I am talking too much about that. So we'll just keep that on the agenda for something to explore at another meeting. So what I'm going to do now is give a little update on the last board meeting, and then we'll talk election committee and wrap this up. So there's just one thing I wanted to bring to your attention out of the last board meeting. It was the approval of an amendment to the TIP that I was really excited about. It's a project called MWRTA, Mobility for All project, and I'm just going to read it briefly. New project funded with $300,000 of FTA Mobility for All grant funds and $75,000 of state contract assisted matching funds. MWRTA is exploring a new accessibility model with complementary technology for demand response services expanding access to transportation options for seniors and individuals with disabilities within the Metro West region. So that's pretty much it. I just think there's something really good about us doing this kind of work, and it seems like he's $300,000 isn't a whole lot of money, but I think they're gonna get a lot of bang for the buck on this one, and this is one I'm gonna want to follow I think there'll probably be a work program. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna talk with Tegan, and maybe Matt can help me answer this. But to the extent we can follow this one, I really would like to follow this one because I think things that they can learn from it can be applied to lots of other places in the region. And I know the folks who are doing this work are thinking that too. So it's not like we need to tell them that they can use it to apply, but we can use that information ourselves in order to advocate for various things, perhaps. But anyways, I'm curious about it, and I'll be following up on it. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Other than that, there was the guide on creating a successful shuttle program, which is very good, and we discussed the criteria for the economic vitality goal, or I should say the metrics for the economic vitality criteria for evaluating TIP projects, and they also produced the TIP, the guidebook for criteria, and there's a poll in there that everyone is encouraged to take. And so that's the feedback on the most recent board meeting, and so the election for chair and co-chair is going to be in October. And I think normally we would have pulled together the election committee in July, since we would have had August off. So we're not really behind schedule, but we do need to assemble that committee now. And I guess you have to have at least 3 people on the committee. And we have 4 here today. I hate to punish you all for coming to the meeting, but can we get 3 of you to be a part of the election committee? I'm not seeing everyone, so I need to.
Are there people who are willing to run again? Like, are you willing to run, and is Scott willing to run, and who are the other? Are there any other elected positions, or just the chairs, the co-chairs?
Just the chair and co-chair. Is that an appropriate question for
No, probably not. I don't know.
Well, Matt and David can tell me. I'm not. Is that an appropriate question for this meeting, David, Matt?
If I'm sort of interpreting the bylaws literally. David, feel free to chime in, but the bylaws state that in September the election committee will come to the advisory council with their proposed nominees for the chair and vice chair position. And during that meeting, members who also wish to run can state they wish to do so, but it's really during that September meeting. David, I see you're unmuted, so do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think typically we find out the answer to Franny's question when we meet. When the committee meets, that's sort of the first question that is discussed at the committee meeting, and it definitely affects the amount of work involved. If we're not at civil war and which we aren't, and the leadership is interested in continuing, then the work tends to be a very light load indeed. But we do, I guess, at the same time, we want to encourage people who have an interest in feeling like they have an opportunity to run, and so we wouldn't want to signal, to cut them off at the pass if they wanted to express that. So that's the best I can comment on that.
Right. And what I was getting at, though, but Franny's question about whether the current leadership wants to continue is not something to be answered now, right? I mean, you will
don't
contact.
have to. I was essentially asking if it's going to be easy or hard.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is not I don't think
You don't
the
have to
state
answer.
ethics board is going to get on us regardless of how you answer that question. But I think it's easier not to answer it in this context, and then
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. And well, I will give a hint and say that I'm enjoying this immensely, but I'm going to continue enjoying. I'm going to continue enjoying it regardless of where I am
Okay.
on the committee. So I can enjoy it just as much, as a non-executive member. Because what's nice now about these Zoom meetings is that I can join in. And the nice thing about the board meetings is that they do allow questions from anyone after the board members have asked questions. But yeah,
Okay.
so you can interpret that however you want until you ask me in some other way.
Well, I'm willing to take a gamble on it. I don't really have much interest, but I'm willing to do it if nobody else wants to.
And David, can we get you on the committee?
Yeah, I'll serve again, but I will simultaneously say I really don't want to chair it. And I don't think that means a whole lot in all likelihood this year, but whether I'm chairing or not, but I think it's appropriate that it not be the same person time after time or being the chair of that group. So since I did it last time, I'd rather not do it this time.
All right, gotcha. And Dan, are you willing to be a part of the committee?
I don't think I have the time for that right now. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. That's the honest answer. And that's a good honest answer is better than telling us what we want to hear and not being able to participate. I guess John is John still?
So
Are you going?
I just pulled up the bylaws just to double check, and David, please jump in if I'm interpreting this incorrectly, or anyone really. But it states that an election committee shall be appointed by the chair prior to yearly elections of officers and shall be chaired by the immediate past chair of the advisory council if available. Election committee membership shall include a voting member from a citizen advocacy organization, a municipality, and if possible, a regional or state agency. Now, if I'm interpreting that correctly, it means it's only 2 people that are required to consist of the committee.
Okay.
Thoughts?
And we're not a good combination because we're 2 people from towns. It'd be nice to have an organization.
Mm.
Yeah. Notice that language, if available.
Yeah.
We haven't had the availability of the immediately former chair in quite some time. So that is a non-starter as far. I mean, I was saying earlier in the day to Matt that I don't think we should interpret that language to mean if the immediate former chair is not available, then let's look for the chair who's before them, and then let's look for the chair before that. That's just I think we should look for the person who's most interested and most capable, or willing to do it, and not worry about chair. Now, in terms of spreading it around among towns versus agencies and advocacy groups, that's I think, a very legitimate, desire within the provision. And if we can spread it around, that would be great. I don't know if, Len, if you had some thoughts about, I mean, since you're the one who appoints the committee, you could just look at the membership list and reach out individually to some people. They don't all have to be on this particular meeting, present at this meeting for you to be, you could reach out to some people you had in mind, who occurred to you as fitting that description of diversity.
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute myself. Yeah, I can do that, and I think the way that I would start with some non-municipality participants and just rank them by attendance, pretty much. I mean, I'm figuring like the more they're involved, then the more they would have some sense of who they want to be on the executive committee, be the chair, vice chair. So does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
I think as long as it makes sense to you, I'm comfortable with it because you're the chair and it's your prerogative. So.
Okay, well, it's nice to know if my prerogative makes sense, though.
Yeah.
So that's so because it's my prerogative to jump off a cliff, but I hope you wouldn't let me do that if I
Well,
told you,
then we'd be
I told you I was
in
going
for
to do
another
that.
chair.
So thanks. All right, hey, so the ball's in my court on that one, so I will go and track down people. It's too bad about the municipality things because I was going to try to drag Andy Reeker into this, but I mean I will not
No, it's
do that. It's just so fun to
crazy.
Oh, you know what? It's fine if you want to drag him in and not me. That's also fine. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. But hey, I think with you two here, I'm not going to make this any harder on myself than I have to. So if for some reason you decide that you don't want to, Franny, then I'll contact him. But I'm not going to contact him as a backup.
I can do it. But you don't need to be getting more people, right? We decided, or if there are more people, great. But otherwise, it sounded from Matt like it could just be me and David, and we can just make it simple, right?
Okay. Is that how you're hearing things, David and Matt?
Well, yeah, I think what we should do is have that first meeting. We can keep it simple for now, and then if it turns out that it's more complicated, then we require a real effort to go recruit people, then maybe we also would want to have another person in our membership to pursue that effort. But we could have the first discussion and find out where we are.
Okay, so then the ball is in the court of Franny and you, David.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to put out an email and just saying, is anybody else interested in joining us? So.
Okay, so all right, I'll work with Matt on that. So fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'll do. Okay, so the ball's on my court. I just need to say to myself the phrase, the ball is in this court, and so I know where it is on this one. So okay,
Well,
fine. Yeah.
And I'm going to reiterate that I don't want to be chair. So if Franny doesn't want to be chair, then the ball is still in your court to find a chair.
Well, I'm willing to be chair, but I'm gambling that it's not going to be too hard this year.
Okay. All right.
And if there is hard, I sort of have in mind an idea that I want to really reach out to all of our past and potential members, reminding them what our tech is. They want to get more involved. And if you are involved, would you like to be on the committee? So I could see reaching out and getting people. So yeah, I'd be willing to be chair.
All right. Cool.
Great.
All right. Okay, so I think that takes care of everything. Old business, new business.
Well, do we have a quorum today?
We unfortunately are just shy of a quorum. Let me just double check the numbers because Andy Reeker left.
Yeah.
So we're at 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we're shy of a quorum, unfortunately.
Okay, so we shouldn't go over the meeting minutes.
We should not.
All right.
Yeah.
Did you have a question? Did you have a question about them?
No. Oh, well, no, but I do want to correct my spelling of my last name. It's O-S-M-A-N. There's no D, and it's not O-N-D. It's A-M.
I don't think I've ever done that before. I apologize, Franny.
No problem. No problem.
That'll be corrected for next time.
Okay.
Wondering what you were listening to while doing the minutes, huh?
A little old, some Donnie and Marie.
You're not alone.
All righty. Well, I didn't think this meeting was going to go the full time, but hey, I mean, I enjoyed it. So hopefully you all did too. I got a lot to think about for the future, or to pass on to whomever is in this position. So thank you all very much. We'll have our next meeting at our regularly scheduled time, on the second Tuesday second Wednesday of September.
Good.
All right. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.